Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Leadership Podcast. My name is Alana Kaivalya. I'm your host, and I am thrilled and honored to be here with you to present you some information that's going to help you step more fully into your role as a spiritual leader. In this version of the podcast, we're going to be talking about the tarot deck. That's right, the tarot deck. This is definitely my absolute favorite form of divination. And not only can I not wait to tell you why, but I can't wait to give you a little insight as to how to start using it right away. If you've ever been curious about the tarot deck or ever wanted to just check it out, this podcast is the perfect opportunity and resource. And if you've ever wanted to figure out how to weave it into your own spiritual teachings or spiritual leadership practices, I'm hopefully going to give you some insights as to how to do that as well. So you'll see if you're watching the video, because this podcast also exists on video on my website or YouTube. I'm trying to put this information out in all of the different mediums and genres that you might have access to. If you're watching it on video, you'll see I've held up my favorite giant version of the tarot deck, which is the Rider Waite tarot deck. And that last part is spelled Waite. This is the most common, most ubiquitous version of the deck, and there is good reason for it. It was created a little over 100 years ago by Arthur Edward Waite, and beautifully illustrated by a female artist named Pamela Cole. And these particular cards draw from our most important symbols and mythology in the West. And the reason why that's so important is because any form of divination, and there are tons, there are lots, any form of divination needs to come from the culture that the person is from, because our psyches are pretty much built fully by the ages of about 5 to 7 years old. So if we grew up in the West, we'll have a Western-based psyche. And if we grew up in the East, we'll have an Eastern-based psyche. And if we grew up in a particular culture or place or even time, then there are going to be some cultural or spatial or temporal nuances that also feed into whatever is important or meaningful to our psyche. So this is something I talk about in all of the different tools that I use as a spiritual leader, because as a Westerner growing up in the West, I have a Western psyche. And I typically work with and teach people who are also Westerners. Not to say that I won't teach people from the East or that I don't have a great understanding of Eastern mythology, symbolism, and mysticism. Of course I do. However, we need to apply the right tools for the right person. This is the same reason why I practice and teach Western astrology. Astrology is psychology, and if I'm working with a Westerner, what's going to be most powerful and resonant for them is Western astrology, even though I have spent more than 20 years of my life in the field of yoga and, of course, Eastern mythology, wisdom, mysticism, and all of that. They all can be helpful, they all can give guidance. But again, if we're really looking to get to the heart of someone's psyche, their spirit, their deep transformation, their soul's work, we'll need to go for whatever it is inbuilt within them already. So this particular tarot deck here, this Rider-Waite tarot deck that is the most ubiquitous for a reason, was designed with Western mythology and symbolism at its heart. So it's going to be most resonant for those with a Western psyche. And it is really our most modern and profound form of divination. Again, there's lots of forms of divination, but they're going to be culturally or locationally or temporally specific. We want to use the one that is right and appropriate for the people that we're working with now. And it happens to be the tarot deck. That's why I've folded it in to all of my spiritual leadership training in all of my suite of courses that I have at my website, alanak.com. You'll find a certification for becoming a tarot reader. And it's the form of divination that works best for the people that I work with and most likely you'll work with. Now, while there are a lot of different kinds of tarot decks out there, there are ones that are even more beautifully illustrated than this one that I'm holding in my hand. They don't have the powerful mythological and symbological connections inbuilt within them. They are beautiful. But the magic of the Rider-Waite deck is that anybody from Western culture, for the most part, can look at any of these cards and actually discern their meaning. They are what we call evocative. These cards immediately evoke understanding. They evoke emotion. They evoke what it is that they're supposed to convey. And while there are very many beautiful decks out there that might have some great images on them, none of them quite work like this one. They're not as evocative, they're not as meaningful, and they don't already come inbuilt with the powerful symbolism and mythology that is already in our psyche. So, this is why I work with and use this particular deck. And again, I have others, but only because I've memorized the cards, right? Because I know already what the cards mean. I can look at another deck and remember what it means. I don't recommend learning the tarot from another deck. I mean, you can. And again, I know that there are people out there who are like, no, no, this deck is the most fantastic, the best one, and that's fine. But for the purposes of training, learning, and really making sure that even your clients can discern something powerful from the deck, I do like this one. So I highly recommend getting the Rider-Waite deck for you and for your purposes and for your people. And just for our work today, I've pulled a few cards so that those of you on video can see, and those of you on audio, I'm going to describe them as fully as I can to show you what I mean, because the tarot deck, its divination practices, really any divination, is going to work based on the symbology and mythology of the culture. So you'll need to have things that are inbuilt within you. They are already inbuilt within you. No need to put them there. They're there. That you can draw from in order to get the answers that you need. A divination practice is good for getting immediate answers to questions you have right now. Big questions you have right now. Questions like, what should I do? Should I take this job? Should I say yes to going on this date? Should I, reconcile with my partner? Those kind of immediate answers. And the reality is, and you probably also know this, no form of divination or astrology or anything else is going to tell you what you don't already know. But it might at least affirm for you the answer that you have already, or the one that you don't necessarily want to make, but that you know might be the right one to make. Even mediumship, working with your spirit guides. Again, all of these things, they're going to help you reveal what's already true, but that we as individuals sometimes when we're in a triggered space or an emotional space or in just a clouded space, we might not be able to access that answer easily or believe it. Okay, so make no mistake, tarot is not magic. Divination is not magic. You are magic, and it's going to help you to put your cards on the table, quite literally. So as we pull tarot cards in whatever order or however which ones we choose, they're going to show us things. So I've chosen the 10 of Pentacles today, the 0 card, the Fool, from the Major Arcana, and the 19 card, the Sun, from the Major Arcana. So you'll see, for example, the 9 of Pentacles. You'll see in the 9 of Pentacles, there's a beautiful woman. She's got a parrot on her finger, and she's got this gorgeous garden behind her where she's just growing coins. So anybody can look at a card like this and see that this woman has an amazing amount of abundance. She's got a beautiful dress with the symbol of Venus on it. She's deeply in her feminine, which is a deeply creative space. And she's actually generating not just riches, but abundance. The garden behind her is filled with grapes, pomegranates. She's got her little bird. She's very happy and content. So without knowing anything else, you can see that this card represents a cycle that is abundant and a deep sense of comfort in the riches that you are surrounded with. Everything is awesomely okay in this card, you guys. So it doesn't take any training, right? It just takes the ability to look at the symbols on this card, know and understand what they already mean to you, and apply them to the situation at hand. Now let's move to what's called a Major Arcana card. There are 78 cards in the tarot deck. There are 4 suits, the pentacles, the cups, the swords, and the wands. And then we've got the ace cards all the way up through the king. And different from a playing card deck, we also have a page card. So there are 4 face cards: page, knight, queen, king, right? From ace to 10, page, knight, king, queen. And those face cards in any of the suit cards represent more mastery in terms of that suit. The page is just getting himself together. in terms of the pentacles, the wands, the swords, or the cups. The knight has some energy behind it, but often kind of going in the wrong direction, but is quite exuberant about it. The queen will have a feminine sense of mastery in that suit, and the king will have a masculine sense of mastery in that suit. And there are, of course, two suits that are feminine and two suits that are masculine. The cups are the most inwardly feminine. The pentacles are an external expression of the feminine. The swords are the most internal expression, thought, intellect of the masculine. And the wands are the most external expression of the masculine, that generativity. I think of Steve Jobs as the most successful expression of the wands. He knew how to grow things. He knew how to create things. He knew how to put things out there and change the world with them. So we've got a big balance of masculine and feminine in the suits. We've got increasing levels of mastery in the suits. The numbered cards always have the same energy. So the ace is always that moment of inspiration in terms of the suit. In fact, every ace card in the tarot deck is going to have the right hand of God coming in, which again is a Western motif, giving us the suit. So the right hand of God is delivering the pentacle or delivering the sword, presenting us with these concepts of either abundance or intuition or mastery or thoughtfulness and intellect. And then each number moves from there. So we want to understand the intentions behind the numbers, and then we can understand what they mean in the card. So for example, 2 is always a conversation. There's a lot of energy in 2. 3 is a triumvirate where we're having dynamism between 3 energies, and there's a great balance in that. There's tension in 2, and there's balance in 3. But beyond these 4 suits, the numbered cards, 1 ace through 10, and the 4 face cards, we have an additional set of 22 cards that we call the major arcana. And the major arcana deliver us a full and complete hero's journey. So for those of you who know me, I have a PhD in mythology, which is effectively a PhD in all things Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell taught us about the hero's journey and its transformative cycle of psychology, that each of us is going through our own journey all the time, sometimes big, sometimes small, and there is a process for that. We begin the journey, we go through some trials, we go through real hardships, and then we achieve some level of not just mastery, but then reintegration back into our society. The major arcana goes through this cycle, starting with the number 0, which is both the beginning and the end. And here I have the 0 card of the major arcana. This is the Fool. And you can see the Fool is ready to set off on a journey, just like we find in the hero's journey. There's, he's got his little rucksack on his back. He's got his nice little white dog as a companion on the journey. You'll find heroes often have companions. Frodo has Sam, for example, in The Lord of the Rings, and he's ready. So the 0 is both the beginning and the end, because of course, as we end one journey, we will always be ready to begin another. So here's the Fool, and you can see a lot of that happening just by looking at the card. And then the final card that I've brought for us today to give some representation and some context for how clearly the Rider-Waite Tarot deck offers us insight as Westerners, as spiritual leaders, for our psyche, for our times. Here is the 19 card in the Major Arcana. It's the Sun. So we're nearing the end of the journey here. And we have a young child upon the back of a white horse and sunflowers and a big bright sun. And for any of us, the sun represents illumination. The sun represents light dawning on our heads, which is literally what's happening here in the card. You can see the red flag of victory. So there's a sense of childlike wonder, of innocence, of excitement. And this is the 19th card. So we're nearly at the end of the journey. And anytime you've felt at the end of a journey, when it's been long and hard and arduous, you might often also feel a sense of pride. This card really represents that. I know that when I've been through some of the most challenging times in my life, once I feel confidently through them, I feel quite glad that I've gone through that process. I feel quite good that somehow I found the fortitude within myself, even in the darkest times, to get to the finish line. And that's what this little guy is expressing in our 19th card of the Major Arcana. So while I can't necessarily in this podcast go through all 78 cards, the good news is I don't actually need to. In fact, in my training program where I teach you to become a certified tarot reader as a part of my suite of courses on spiritual leadership, while I do go through every card, I'm constantly encouraging my students, don't try to rote memorize them. It doesn't work that way. These cards are meant to speak to something more deep within our psyche, to our internal mythology, to the part of us on the inside that recognizes this. The mythology of our psyche shows up in our dreams, and the symbols are always delivering meaning to us. So as we get to know the cards, just as your dreams are always going to deliver the message that you need most in the way that you will best understand it, the cards do the same. They use images and symbols that are well known to the unconscious parts of our psyche. And as you look at a card, even though I can share with you that when you see a rose, it's almost like a lotus, that there's a sense of internal growth, that when you see a wand, it means that magic is afoot. I can tell you what all the symbols mean, and I do. You'll need to create your own dialogue with the cards. You'll need to get to know them in your own way. Start pulling them for yourself. And when you see the card and when you feel what the card is bringing up for you, that is actually what your psyche is trying to communicate to you. You are being shown a specific card for a reason because there's something in this card that is evocative enough for you, for your psyche, to know what's being said. And the more that you work with the cards, the more confident you will become in what the cards are trying to communicate to you. And you'll develop like this language with the cards. Now, my friends, this is a really, really important point because the cards speak to those deeper parts of your psyche. They speak to the unconscious. And the unconscious's language is mythology. We know that because that's how you dream every night. You dream in the language of myth. So if you can actually have a physical representation of the mythology of the psyche, which is the tarot cards, then your unconscious doesn't have to wait until you go to sleep. It doesn't have to work so hard to deliver the messages that you need to hear. If you give your unconscious the chance to speak through a method of divination like the tarot deck, you are creating communication between your unconscious self and your conscious self, and that is yoga. Yoga is union between all the parts of who you are. And until you create methods of dialogue, methods of communication, transparency, illumination between your superconsciousness, your consciousness, and your unconsciousness, you're stuck. There is no yoga. But when you can use a tool like the tarot deck, when you can use a methodology like astrology, when you can connect with your spirit guides, when you've got these different tools that I teach in terms of spiritual leadership that help you create dialogue and communication between all the parts of your psyche, where you can get the wisdom from the unconscious, where you can receive the inspiration from the superconscious, that is yoga. That is that union that we as spiritual leaders are quite literally looking for. You create communication and the yoga occurs. So the tarot deck is not magic. It's not fortune telling. It's a way to unlock the wisdom of the deeper parts within yourself to get the answers that you need. And by strengthening that form of communication, you will always get the answers that you need. And you will always be in communion, deep communion with yourself, which is yoga. So I very much encourage you, at the very least, to make sure that you get a Rider-Waite tarot deck. Even if you branch out and get some other deck in the future, start with the Rider-Waite. Really learn the language of the cards here because it is designed and developed for your psyche, for the Western psyche, for the mythology and symbols that are already inbuilt within us. So start there. And then, of course, I have a ton of resources for you on the tarot to learn further, not just podcasts like this, but I've got some blogs. And of course, I have a certification program where I teach you how to read the whole deck. Not to mention a fantastic community. If you want to join my community, I have a monthly membership called the Higher Education and Yoga Membership, where we provide you additional training, support, and community all month long, so we can work with you in order to help you step more fully into your role as a spiritual leader. Your community and your students need you more now than they ever have before. And it is my great honor and pleasure to help you get the training that you need to step into that role for them. So I'll look forward to speaking with you on the next podcast. And until then, please take care of yourselves and take care of each other.